Hello, I am Padma Malikarjunan, and I am an Enterprise Support Manager at AWS, and I'm based out of Austin, Texas. Welcome to AWS Supports You, where we share best practices and troubleshooting tips from AWS Support. Joining me today is Rob Iguereta and Laura Salitos from AWS. Can you give us a quick introduction? Let's start with you, Rob.
Hi, thanks, Padma. Yeah, my name is Rob Higuerita, and I'm a Principal Technical Account Manager located in Austin, Texas, and really excited to be here to talk a little bit more about identity and access management and access keys.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Salitos. I'm a senior security consultant out of Tampa Bay, Florida.
Thank you. Everyone, today we will be introducing you to best practices for securing your AWS Identity and Access Management or IAM access keys. We will specifically focus on how to avoid embedding IAM access keys in your code, as well as remediate aged access keys. Before we get into the details, a quick note to our attendees online. Please feel free to use the chat window on the right-hand side of your screen to share your thoughts and ask your questions throughout the episode. We look forward to hearing from you today. Rob, can you walk us through what we're going to be talking about today?
Sure, Padma, thanks. So as mentioned, we're going to be talking a little bit about identity and access management and the access keys. And so we're going to specifically try and cover a little bit of introduction to what identity and access management is in AWS and a little on users and access keys. So if you're not familiar with IAM at AWS, it's our identity and access management platform that allows you to give granular access to your AWS accounts. Inside of the IAM, we have users, groups, and roles. And specifically today, we're going to be talking about IAM users and access keys. So a user is a entity that you have inside of your account that you give to one individual to use. And you have the option to set a username and password is going to be your normal setting, and then give an API key as well to, or an access key and secret access key that'll be used to give API access to your AWS account. These are long-lived, persistent credentials that exist within your AWS account. And so you want to make sure that those are guarded very carefully, and if all possible, not use the access keys and use some other items that we have. If you joined us for one of our previous episodes where we had securing your IAM access keys, Pat is going to drop a link into that past episode. We kind of went in depth a little bit more on some other options to leverage. We're going to rehash some of those, though, really quickly, because it really is important to try not to embed these, even though today we're going to give you some alternative ways to manage them and be able to continue using them. Our AWS best practices, where possible, don't embed AWS IAM access keys into your application. And so that's what we're kind of showing here is a little bit of basically do not embed access keys and secret access keys in code, right? Especially don't also share those keys amongst various applications. If you're going to have to use them, make them very purpose-built and purpose-use case so that you don't have multiple users using the same keys. It'll make it really hard for you to backtrack to understand, who implemented what and what actually is using that key. For administration overhead, it can just be kind of a pain. And for security, your security team will probably not be very happy with you if you continue to share one single key with the same access. So as we see here, we essentially have where two users have access to an EC2 instance for an application, and they've chosen to embed the access key and secret access key into their actual application so that application can make gets or put requests to S3. This goes against the AWS best practice because, again, you're embedding those access keys into your application and storing them long-term persistent keys there. The recommended alternative that we discussed before is just simply leveraging an IAM role on that EC2 instance that has permissions. This way, the EC2 instance will use the instance metadata service to be able to query IAM for that key validation and then allow it to have access to that S3 bucket. This also avoids you, having to worry about remembering to put those keys into your application, only using them in one place, and any updates of those keys and stuff like that you don't actually have to do since it's using a role that gets temporary credentials there, leveraging our token service. So that's how it's going to end up looking. It's going to just take that from the EC2 instance, and it's going to get you an STS temp credential that's going to basically be used in order to make those calls into your service to give your access to S3 as needed. We're going to cover this a little bit more in depth later on, and we talked about this last time too, is basically if you have to use these, you want to implement rotation, you want to use something like AWS Secrets Manager that's going to allow you to store those keys in a secure manner, not necessarily inside the application itself, but as parameters that you'll pull from Secrets Manager and be able to then import those and use this. This is what Laura's going to cover a little bit later, really in depth about the overall rotation of those and kind of automating that so that you don't have to remember to do it yourself. But really, this will just give an instance role that will have access to Secrets Manager. What will then go out and make a call to Secrets Manager to get what the actual key is for it, return that back to your application with that secret, and that's what's going to then give you access to your S3 bucket. If at all possible, again, use the IAM role itself to just grant access to your resource. But if you need to use embedded, just for the way that your application works or the way the service you're trying to call works, you can use that as well. So all things said, again, if you can, avoid using the access keys, but if you have to use them, implement something like AWS Secrets Manager to help you with the rotation of those. One of the other reasons why it's great not to have to look at, managing those access keys is because they can get aged, and our best practice is to recommend that you rotate those every 90 days or sooner. And you can do a few things to help you to be able to, do this in advance, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about if you have to use the access keys, because sometimes you might have a third-party vendor, and that third-party vendor may only grant access or only allow you to do access with access keys. And so you may have to keep those in your environment, and we understand that. And so we want to give you a few options in order to be able to help you to manage those keys and to, mitigate the long-term life of those. So we're going to talk a little bit about AWS Config. If you missed it before, we did another full episode on AWS Config and how to use automatic remediations with the service in order to help you to secure your environment and do a lot of other things that you can have with AWS Config. So we'll drop a link in the chat as well for that past episode so you can go check it out, and a little bit about AWS Config itself. But AWS Config can help you to manage these edge access keys because it can set up this rule here that you see, this access keys rotated. And what it's going to do is it's going to check whether that active access key are rotated within a number of days. And you can specify that max access key age. So if you wanted to say in your organization, be really strict and say every 30 days, those keys have to be aged, or you're not going to be able to do it every 90 days, so you're going to set it to 100 days or 120 days, but you want to get a notification, essentially, that something is non-compliant in that time span. Well, you can use AWS Config in order to help you do that by setting up this rule. If you go and check out the previous episode, we talk about those auto remediations. You can help to leverage that to also do some other activities based on that notification that comes through, that you have a non-compliant resource as well. Before I move forward, Padma, I do want to just double check and see, do we have any questions from the audience so far?
Hi, Rob. Thank you. Everyone, please feel free to post some questions here. We have Rob and Laura who can take those for you. In the meantime, Rob, I have a question for you on single sign-on.
Mm-hmm.
When might a customer use SSO or single sign-on versus IAM? And would it solve for the access keys embedding you're discussing?
Thanks, Padma. Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about that. So our AWS SSO or single sign-on can be used instead of AWS Identity and Access Management to grant access into your AWS accounts to give permissions to your resources, right? It's not going to serve exactly the same purpose as Identity and Access Management, but the nice thing about SSO is when you set that up, everything gets implemented through roles. So when a user signs in, you can have them federate their identification to, say, your Active Directory environment or another provider that you have set up for your login. And that way they can use those corporate credentials to get access to their AWS account to be able to do things within it. And the nice thing about that is when they actually sign in and they try and access one of the accounts, they're actually getting access to a role. And so that in of itself is going to give them temporary credentials. So rather than having a long list of IAM users that you have to administer within Identity and Access Management and users to your corporate identity, you can kind of do it all in one location. Since it is using a role, it is going to get temporary credentials. So this is where you're not going to be able to use SSO to embed into applications, because it's going to be a short-lived token that you're going to get, which is really just used for accessing the actual console itself. So it's a good alternative for your organization if you want to be able to leverage things like scan provisioning, have short-term credentials, If you use AWS SO, you get a really nice landing page of all the accounts that you get access to. So when you log in, instead of having to remember, say, switching roles between accounts, where you might have to remember what the account name or number is, and then the role you're specifically trying to assume into, SSO kind of takes that away and basically shows you a nice big landing page of resources that you can just click into. Thanks, Kevin.
Got it. Thank you, Rob. And back to you.
All right. So we were just discussing a little bit about config. And so that is one option that you have in order to be able to keep track of those resources, get notifications if they're past whatever you set as your max access key age within this config role, and deploy that into your account. I'm going to turn it over to Laura, though, to cover what we have as a solution to be able to automatically rotate IAM users and access keys, leveraging AWS prescriptive solution.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob. So like everything we do at AWS, this was really inspired by customers. So we work very closely with a few of our customers to be design partners in building the solution out. Like Rob said again earlier, it is not best practices, but when there are use cases through your third-party vendors where this needs to be done, we wanted to create a solution in place so that it was easier to maintain and that we could iterate on this as a solution for customers. So that's really where the origin of this came from. So the architecture we're looking at today is around what is the prescriptive guidance for if you do have to do this, how do you do it in an automated and scalable fashion? So I'm going to walk through the architecture here. This is a automation that runs every 24 hours within your AWS environment. You have a Lambda function that's going to scan all IAM users in your account. It's going to then do some logic conditioning and say, for each access key that's assigned to an IAM user in your account, is there a violation? If not, no action is required. Then we can start going down the architectural diagram here and say, if there is a violation, if it's aged past that 90-day parameter, then we're going to have to do some work. We're going to actually be able to do some automated rotation, create some IAM policies for creating a new key to replace the old aged one, and then storing that in Secrets Manager. Again, trying to embed best practices through the entire automation orchestration here. But not only that, we want full transparency, right? So we want to be able to not only automate the rotation of these keys, create new ones to do all the work for the developers, but we also want to notify developers as well. So this is where we want to incorporate that tag into SNS to trigger another Lambda function. This Lambda function towards the bottom left-hand side of the screen is going to pull in a custom email template and then send it through SES an actual email to those end users to let them know, what is happening, why is this important from a security regulation standpoint, and what was changed. So again, there is that visibility from end to end, and nothing really that the developer needs to do other than go retrieve their new secret. All of that has been orchestrated in the back end. Like I mentioned earlier, this is all based off of customer feedback and design partnership. So we are actually in the process of developing a version 2. It's going through a peer review process right now and should be released as part of our GitHub towards the end of this month. So I'd like to switch over to a demo now. This demo, we're going to be digging into the version 2, and I will go over a couple examples of the differences and then show you a demo through our lab environment. All right, perfect. So this is where I want to get into a little bit more of how we've improved things from version 2. You'll notice a lot of the same logic workflow throughout the diagram, but we've really tried to make this as scalable as possible. So with version 2, what we've done is we've extrapolated our architecture so where you only need to deploy the main components into a centralized account instead of all sub-accounts. This, again, is going to be very important and helpful from a scalability perspective, but also from a cost savings perspective. On the right-hand side, all rotation work and all key storage is still going to happen at the individual account layer, as you see on the right-hand side of the architecture. Then it's going to pass back to the main area where it's going to be able to send that email notification. I want to step through what this deployment looks like. Talking back to that assumed roles area, this is a thing that can be either deployed as a stack or a stack set through AWS organizations. You can either keep these default naming conventions or customize it based on how you guys need it in your environment. And then you're going to add in your primary account ID, organization ID. Those will help restrict and do some more security. And I've highlighted there where you can see an exemptions group. There is always a use case where we're going to want to maybe exclude a user from that rotation. As you can see, I need to check off this last box here to allow my CloudFormation template to create an IAM resource. To save time, I've already done this in my lab, so I'm just switched over to a fully deployed solution of that. You can see where the IAM exemption group was created and the new role. So this is already in our lab environment, and we're going to do the same thing now for the rotation solution. So for this one, it's a little bit more complicated because this is going to be the meat of the solution. This is that centralized deployment. So this is where you need to put in your S3 bucket and mainly your deployment configurations. Then we're going to call out a flag here. This is our new feature. It's a dry run flag. By default, it's true. So it will actually deploy and run in a audit mode. That is very helpful for customers because they might not want to audit the first time or if they're testing this script. Then as I scroll down here, we're going to see some configurations for the module. Again, organization ID to help lock things down, looking into the exemptions group. Again, keep all of these as default or you can customize them. AWS best practices calls out the 90 days for rotation. Again, these are customizable. We've also allowed for buffers in place too. Say, for instance, a developer wants to be notified within 90 days, but you want to wait for 10 days for that actual rotation. All right, once all of those are updated and filled out, we're going to do the same thing here. Again, making sure CloudFormation has permissions for the IAM creation. And I've already deployed in our lab, so a quick switch over here. The three main callouts I want to have is around our Lambda functions. As we saw in our architectural diagram, all of these have been modulated. So we have IAM inventory, a notifier component, and then the actual component that does the rotation. So I'm going to open up the rotation component. That's where the main logic of what is in violation, if it is or if it isn't, how it's going to be rotated, and all of that. This is also a way that you can open this up and use this as a mandatory trigger to do an ad hoc test, right? So instead of using that 24-hour cycle, you can just kick that off. Here's a look at our IAM accounts. So we're going to target the M. Johnson account because A. Smith is in our exclusions group. So let's drill into M. Johnson. We're going to switch over to security credentials, and you can see there's two keys already existing here. We're going to go through and actually have the script delete the oldest one that's unused and create a new one. So switching back to our Lambda function, we're going to actually utilize as part of your package one of these test cases. So we're going to grab that test configuration, fill it out with that M. Johnson user, and click test. This is going to kick off the actual auditing. Once that completes, we will have a full output. We're going to be able to see what the Lambda actually did. So as you can read on the screen here, we found that there was a forced rotate flag on this user, and then what was done to it. So we can see the two keys were detected. We saw that the key that was the oldest was the one that was deleted, and a new key. We can see there was another invocation that happened that created the new key. So without refreshing the page, I want to show that the validation of the two keys that were found. There's key one, this is key two. And again, just to validate, we see both of those there. Now I'm going to refresh the page. Once it's refreshed, you'll have seen that it was cleaned up, and we'll see the new J ending with JJMHD. This is the new key now that was just created. But not only was this new key created, a couple more activities happened in the background. So we're going to switch over to Secrets Manager, like our architectural diagram showed us. We now have a new key that has been added for user M. Johnson. So you can drill down into this. This is where your developers or yourself can come in here and eventually retrieve the secret value. So you can grab your secret access key here and start utilizing and working with it. In addition to this area here, we also are going to be sending an email. A lot of the overlap here with the email that gets triggered is that it's going to identify why this happened. You know, security is the most important part of any organization. This IAM rotation key is part of this policy and best practices. How does this go against different compliance standards? This is called out as part of CIS best practices. This is called out in NIST, a well-architected framework. And then what is the actual violation that happened? Again, we want to make this email actionable so the person can see, okay, this is the key that was deleted. This is the new thing I need to start working with. And here's the rotation period, so I'm aware of it now. And then below, you can add in your department name information and an administrator that they can reach out to if they have any questions. So that is at the example and the conclusion of the demo. Rob, we can't hear you. I think you might be on mute.
Oh, thanks, Laura. Yep. Hey, Padma, do we have any questions from the audience after the demo?
Hey, Rob. Yes, we do. And thanks for the demo, Laura. There are a few questions here on the chat window. And let me read the first one for you. This question is about storing secret keys in a .env file. So first, thank you to Warren Fee for your question. You have a secret in a .env file, which is read from a package and assigned to a variable, which is eventually used in the body of your code. And your question is it safe to do that?
So this is a great question because I feel like we're seeing a lot of this as part of online forums and examples that are out there. I would advise against this. Anything that can't be encrypted in storage locally at rest or in transit, think of these configuration files as just that, configuration files and variables. So anything that you're okay, with sharing or other people seeing, that is totally fine. This could be, partitions, specific kind of environmental based things. But when we start getting into credentials or what are true secrets, that's where we want password vaults or extrapolating it out and utilizing roles like Rob had mentioned earlier. So if I was a developer, anytime I could, I would be able to do some sort of integration to a secrets manager to dynamically pull those permissions, and then also making sure that those rotations are happening. Sometimes I've come across where when stored in configuration files, there's credential leakage when getting post or shared. People forget to go back and edit and modify them. So by having your code be dynamic, it is more of a fail safe to make sure you guys are following best practices. And if anything ever was happened or breached on that hard coded credential within your environmental variable, you've got all of that already orchestrated. You can just go into the console, switch it at the secrets manager level, and your code automatically will pick that up.
Got it. Thank you, Laura. I have a few more questions over here. This next question is about conformance packs for AWS Config. So this question comes from Tommy242. Thank you very much for your question, Tommy242, and welcome back. And the question is, will you be covering conformance packs for AWS Config? And can you, if possible, talk a little bit about any customizations we can add, and any information around that would be helpful.
Thanks, Padma. So we did cover AWS Config in a previous episode as well. So I definitely suggest going back to taking a look at that so we can drop a link into the chat for that previous video. We did cover a little bit about kind of the different options between like rules and then like the performance packs and such, and having those to leverage within AWS Config. So it's going to be a really good place. Laura, I don't know if you have anything else specific you'd like to add, but that episode should give you some information.
Thank you, Rob. This next question. This question is about automating access key secrets. So this question is from IB9JA. Thank you very much for your question. And the question is, can I automate access key secrets for a large number of users?
Yeah, I can take this one. So definitely. The example I showed was us kicking off an ad hoc on one user. What's actually happening without any kind of user involvement is the first IAM inventory function will grab and query AWS organizations to find all accounts. Then from there, it pivots into another Lambda function. And then each AWS account is going to have a full inventory of all of your AWS users. So unless that user is in an IAM exemptions group, it's going to be part of this evaluation. So unlike my example where I just showed a one-off to show a clean demo, you can really orchestrate this to all users across all accounts, across all regions. So this is very much powerful in terms of scale. And then you can also limit it in terms of what's in scope. When we have deployed this with several of our customers, they've done a phased rollout. So the way they've done that is only deploying the assumed role stack as part of some subsets of their organization OUs. So if it's not there, that the other Lambdas will fail and it won't even try and rotate. And that way they were able to slowly start building out and rolling out the coverage of users. So to answer your question, yes, this is absolutely designed to work at scale for all users in your account unless you designate it not to.
Thank you, Laura. And one more final question. This question is about the number of services in the suite of AWS suite of security services? So this question comes from Sammy D446. Thank you very much for your question. I am new to AWS. Can you talk about the number of tools in AWS? For example, we have IAM, CloudTrail, CloudWatch, Config, GuardDuty, WAF, Inspector, as well as the AWS Security Hub. What is the purpose of having a variety of different number of tools in the security suite of services?
Thanks, Padma. So I think it goes back to kind of what Laura was kind of mentioning before, security should be that kind of top priority item. And it is a top priority item for AWS. And that's why we have a full suite of security, products that we offer. That goes because there are different organizations that have different security needs and different compliance requirements. And so we offer a variety of different services that will allow you to try and meet those compliance requirements, using things like, I think we also missed like Audit Manager. That's another security related item that we have, but using CloudTrail to be able to track back and be able to see what's happened within your account. So we have all these different offerings so that you can kind of pick and choose depending on what your organizational needs are to help you, achieve those goals. That's kind of, why we have quite a few of them. They're very powerful in their own individual use, but they are great to be able to use and complement each other to have things like Security Hub to be able to help you aggregate things from Config and GuardDuty and take those other, VPC flow log information and leverage features like Macy to do like DLP for your environment. So quite a bit there as far as the security items.
Got it.
I'd like to add on to that and just say basically to Rob's point, AWS builds tools for developers and builders. So these are tools that are at your disposal to solve any problem you guys can think of. So that's why they're so diverse and so vast. But to, again, Rob's point, these all integrate into each other. So you have unified solution fronts through Security Hub, where you can integrate all of these and then actually start doing remediation playbooks that we've done announcements and we have different resources for. So if it does seem a little overwhelming, keep in mind that all of these things can be orchestrated and automated and centralized. Because really, again, while we have a bunch of different tools that you can use for any kind of project you have, we also have prescriptive guidance to be able to lead you down the path of security maturity. And I think that's kind of a common theme here of how do you get, our customers from that journey into a more secure environment, more mature environment, and teach them along the way. So it's definitely a great question. And we definitely have resources to be able to help you drill down into the tools you need and how to get that all integrated.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Rob. Everyone continue to post these questions. We have our experts here, Laura and Rob, who can take the questions. So back to you.
All right. Thanks, Padma. So we're going to go back to our deck here real quickly to talk about a few things. We kind of covered these in the previous episode, but it's just one of those really important things to be able to do things like automate, right, and be able to not have to have everything be manually remediated. So I want to talk real quickly about this automation to be able to detect and respond to an inadvertently exposed access key using the AWS Health tools. So this is going to allow you, so if you have something where you are embedding a access key and secret access key into your application, and your developers use things like a repo to publish these to, and mistakenly, publish a access key and secret access key embedded in the code to a public repository. AWS Health is going to be able to help you to detect that, trigger basically a overall alert that is detected that the risk credential exposed has been there, which you could then leverage in order to, kind of implement. We did a full demo of this solution that we'll post the links in for the Git repository as well, and a little bit of information about this. But if you are using access keys and you're rotating them, if you're embedding them in your application still, this is a great way to be able to have response built in to help you do things that once it gets identified, to walk through this CloudWatch event, trigger a step function that sets off these lambdas that says, hey, let's go ahead and delete that exposed key. Let me do a quick dig through CloudTrail to understand what that access key has done most recently, and then send a notification email to the administrator, say, hey, you've had a key that was inadvertently exposed. Here's the API calls that we saw it most recently do. Please go continue to investigate this. While this helps you to be able to delete that key and stop, it doesn't mean that you should just, take it at its face value and no longer do your own investigation. Still highly recommend that you continue to investigate this further. It will just help you to, automate some of the portions to it. And speaking of, still continue to investigate, here's a few things that you can take a look at to continue to do. And this would be if you don't have the solution kind of implemented as well. You'll have to do some manual actions here as well. So just wanted to cover that because as of today, you may not have the solution mentioned implemented. But if you get a notification that says, hey, your AWS, IAM access key, secret access key have been inadvertently exposed, what should you do? We want to make sure that customers have this. So we do have a link that we'll post into the chat as well. That's going to be the what to do if you inadvertently expose an AWS access key. But really, primary thing is going to be, disable that IAM access key as soon as possible. If you're an enterprise support customer, you may get a notification about this, and it may have an IAM policy already applied to it that blocks everything. There is a denial that's built in that you can use with that IAM to just disable basically from doing everything. We definitely recommend to disable that, delete the key, implement that into your application. But we do also understand that you may have it be in a production application that you're going to have to make sure that you get the key rotated and fixed before you don't take your application down. May get a posting into your personal health dashboard. If you're not familiar with the personal health dashboard, it basically will be a notification that's specified, similar to how we post for our status health dashboard, but it's really related to just your AWS account. It should have some insightful information to what the access key is inadvertently exposed, maybe some remediation actions that you can take as well. So that's going to end up getting you through the process of just kind of understanding where you should start. And then you're really going to want to do that deep dive into your CloudTrail. Try and look for things like, did that access key rotate it and create a second access key that it's now using that one instead? Did it create another IAM user that it's just going to parallel over to that has the same access? So you really want to make sure that you do that thorough investigation to really understand what has happened in the account so you know where you have to go from there. Laura, I'll just ask, I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to, sorry to put you on the spot, add on to kind of the investigation side.
No, I think that, again, the first part is visibility. If you don't know what you have out there, if you don't know what's happened to things that you have out there, I feel like that's the biggest gap. So, having solutions like this and trying to prevent them and detect them, you really want to make sure you have both sides covered. So, like you've demonstrated here, I think these are great tools to add to your tool belt to really, again, get further down that maturity roadmap path.
Great, thanks, Laura, appreciate it. And if you are an enterprise support customer, if you do get this notification, please reach out to your technical account manager for assistance. We do have some programs in place that we can help with enterprise support customers for reacting to an inadvertent IAM access key. So please engage your technical account manager. Padma, do you want to stop here before we go to kind of our recap slide to see if there's any other questions from the audience?
Hi, Rob. Thank you very much. A question just literally popped in. So I'm going to check the screen here. The question here is about Lambda functions and querying using parameter store. So the question, thank you for your question. It's K4RMA. The question is, they have a Lambda function that queries the parameter store to get encrypted parameters. Can you talk a little bit about keeping the Lambda function warm and what it means to scale the number of calls to Lambda?
So I'm definitely not a Lambda expert, I'll say that for one. But if you're going to be making a lot of calls, right, and you need to get that credential, that's if you're worried about, this is typical in anything that we're dealing with, right? If you're worried about hitting rate limits and stuff, we do always make a recommendation that you can implement retries and exponential back off, right? To make sure that if you do hit a limit for one call, it gets retried again. So that way you can kind of make sure that you don't hit those, throttle limits and continue to kind of bombard back on having issues with your Lambda. I don't know, Laura, if you have anything else that you'd like to add for that, if you're more familiar with the Lambda side.
Yeah, it's all around how you you architect your solution. So if you are worried about several queries, there's ways that we can set up caching that would be able to store it in a secure way, both encryption at rest and in transit. We already have Lambdas that encrypt at rest already, so you can utilize some of that benefit. If you start hitting your upper thresholds, that's something that we can look to disperse and scale out your architecture. So this would be a great use case for having a conversation with your SA or with ProServe. to be able to really break it down and show you how to scale it appropriately, how to do caching in a secure way, whether it be step functions or orchestrating other lambdas, or utilizing other types of serverless technologies. But yes, that use case is definitely doable. It's just a matter of first spin up of Lambda, is it available, or will there have to be some additional workarounds? So that's definitely something we can help you with.
Got it. And what I'll do is I'll share a link here to best practices for how you can take advantage of execution environments and how you can reuse them to improve performance of your Lambda function, or also how you can use a keep alive to maintain those persistent connections. And I'll post the link here for you here shortly. With that, back to you, Laura and Rob.
Great. Thanks, Padma. So just wanted to go back over here, just a couple of items for options for finding and remediating aged IAM access keys, or, working through just kind of understanding some of the information that we've talked today as a recap. So we didn't really cover a lot on Trusted Advisor today. That AWS risk item that I was mentioning before does get added into your Trusted Advisor report. So you can actually use Trusted Advisor to see this and be able to kind of use that reporting function there in Trusted Advisor to see that you might have an inadvertently exposed access key. And so that's going to help you, right, to be able to take a look at things there. AWS Config, we covered a little bit about that access keys rotated rule. That's going to help you to see resources that are compliant or non-compliant for your access keys. And then we covered, or Laura covered in depth, really, the AWS perspective guidance on security and identity and compliance, leveraging the solution that she helped build for the automatically rotate IAM user access keys. So definitely check these things out here. We'll post some of the links into the chat, or have been posted by Padma. So thanks, Padma, in order to help you be able to go away and take a look at some of these resources that we have available. So Padma, I guess in closing, do we have any other questions or anything like that came in?
Well, we don't have any more questions on the chat window at this time. Looks like Rob and Laura, you have answered a lot of questions for us today. Is there anything else you want to add before we go?
Sure. So just in addition to, like Laura was mentioning, some of the programs and stuff that we have for offering, I always like to mention, just because I've had a couple of customers that have gone through it and have found some really great value in it, is what we call our Security Ethics Accelerator. And so Laura could probably go more detail into it. My customers have seen value in it, just kind of being able to help them with their security posture in AWS. So Laura, I'll turn it over to you if you have some more to add to that, since it is in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, definitely. So like you, I've seen a ton of success through these epics and these security accelerators. Like the name suggests, by partnering with AWS ProServe, we're really able to increase those timelines, be able to do things very quickly at scale. Some of the questions that have been asked in chat, I think, could benefit from partnering with an SA or with AWS ProServe to be able to really bring it to that next level, bring it with those expertise of, am I truly secure? Am I truly secure? What are other people in the industry doing? How are they doing it at scale? How are they going through these different kinds of challenges? And then the most important thing that I feel like we offer is guidance on a maturity roadmap. So we have, again, a lot of customers that come to us wanting and knowing about the cloud, and that's kind of where it starts and ends. Once they're in the cloud, they don't know what to do next, or what the next maturity step would be once they're able to kind of own their book of work at that point. So that's where we, again, come in and start advising to say, this is where you guys need to grow to. These are the tools you need to implement, and this is how you do it, and this is how you do it in an automated fashion. So again, these are why we're getting a lot of positive feedback from our customers, why we have repeat customers, and why this has been such a huge benefit.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura and Rob, for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us today. So everyone, today we looked at securing your applications using AWS Identity and Access Management, or IAM Access Keys. And we discussed alternatives for authentication. Thank you to our moderators for posting the registration page for our upcoming episodes, awssupportsyou.splashthat.com. Please bookmark this page, and we hope you can join us next time. If there are any questions that were not answered today, please post them on forums.aws.amazon.com and email us feedback, awssupportsyou@amazon.com. We want to hear from you. Tell us what else you would like to see on this show. Thank you for joining us today at AWS Supports You. Happy cloud computing.
Cloud computing, everyone.
See ya.